The autumn evening was winding down at the busy McDonald's on Parker Street. The restaurant buzzed with its usual dinner rush, the smell of fresh fries filling the air, the sound of ice dispensing from the soda machine, and the friendly chatter of families enjoying their meals. Through the large windows, the setting sun cast a warm golden glow across the tables, making the whole scene feel like a slice of everyday American life. Among the crowd stood a teenage girl, her backpack still heavy with debate team materials and textbooks. She'd stayed late at school to help her team prepare for the upcoming state championships, where they'd be defending their title from last year. Her stomach growled as she waited in line, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since lunch. The girl adjusted her neat blue jacket, a recent birthday gift from her grandmother, and checked her phone again. "Almost home, Mom." Picking up dinner for the kids, she typed quickly, adding a heart emoji. Her little brother and sister would be bouncing off the walls by now, eager for their happy meals. Being the eldest, she often took on these kinds of responsibilities, especially since their mom had picked up extra evening shifts at the hospital. The line moved slowly forward as she watched the familiar faces behind the counter work their magic. She recognized most of them. This McDonald's was just 2 blocks from her high school, and she'd been coming here since freshman year. Mr. Thompson, the evening manager, gave her a friendly wave. He knew she was one of the good ones, always polite, never causing trouble, and occasionally helping to clean up when other kids left messes. A group of younger kids from her school stood near the drink station, laughing about something on their phones. The girl smiled, remembering how she used to hang out here with her friends too, before advanced classes and extracurricular activities started taking up most of her free time. Now she was focused on maintaining her 4.0 GPA and building up her college application. Her counselor said she had a real shot at an Ivy League scholarship. The electronic menu boards above flickered with the day's specials. She already knew what she needed to order. 1 Big Mac meal for herself she'd earned it after that intense debate practice, and 2 Happy Meals with apple slices instead of fries, her mom's rule about healthy choices. She'd even remembered to bring the coupons from the Sunday paper, carefully folded in her wallet. The restaurant's playlist switched to an old soul song, one her dad used to play on Sunday mornings while making pancakes. Before things changed. She hummed along softly, swaying slightly to the rhythm as the line inched forward. A few more minutes and she'd be heading home, ready to help her siblings with their homework before tackling her own AP chemistry assignments. Outside, the street was getting darker as evening settled in. The streetlights flickered on one by one, and the occasional bus rumbled past, its windows glowing with interior light. Everything felt normal, peaceful even. Just another Tuesday evening at McDonald's, with people going about their lives, ordering their favorite meals, and heading home to their families. The girl checked her wallet one more time, making sure she had enough cash, plus a little extra for the tip jar. She believed in karma, treat people right, and good things come back to you. That's what her grandmother always said, and so far it seemed to work. She was just 2 people away from the counter now, already tasting those hot, salty fries in her mind. Little did she know that in the next few minutes, her ordinary evening would turn into something completely unexpected. The peaceful atmosphere of this familiar place was about to shatter, and her life would never be quite the same again. But for now, she was just a teenage girl in a blue jacket, waiting to order dinner at McDonald's, living in what felt like the most normal moment in the world. The peaceful evening atmosphere at McDonald's shattered like glass when the front doors burst open with a bang. 3 police officers rushed in, their boots squeaking against the freshly mopped floor. The restaurant's cheerful buzz died instantly, replaced by a heavy silence broken only by the soft music still playing overhead and the sizzle of fries in the kitchen. The girl stood frozen at the counter, her hand still holding her wallet, mind trying to process the sudden change. She'd just finished giving her order to the cashier, 2 Happy Meals with apple slices, please, when the commotion started. The young cashier's eyes widened, her finger hovering over the register keys, equally startled by the officer's dramatic entrance. Time seemed to slow down as the officers scanned the crowd. Their faces were intense, focused, like hunters tracking prey. The lead officer, a tall woman with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, held a small radio close to her mouth. Her free hand rested on her belt near her equipment. The two male officers flanked her, their eyes darting from face to face in the crowded restaurant. Other customers began to react. Parents pulled their children closer, teenagers lowered their phones, and elderly diners gripped their seats tightly. A baby started crying somewhere in the back, its wails cutting through the tense silence. The evening manager stepped out from behind the counter, his name tag catching the fluorescent light as he moved. The girl felt her heart skip a beat as the female officer's gaze swept past her, then snapped back. There was something in that look that made her stomach drop. She glanced down at herself, just her regular blue jacket, debate team shirt, and jeans. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should attract attention, yet something was wrong. Very wrong. That's her. The words exploded through the restaurant like a thunderclap. The female officer's arm shot up, pointing directly at the girl. Everything after that happened so fast, yet somehow in slow motion, like a movie playing at the wrong speed. Other customers scrambled back, creating a circle of empty space around her. The girl's phone slipped from her fingers as she tried to turn around, her mind racing to understand what was happening. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask what was going on, but no words came out. The world had suddenly turned upside down, and she couldn't find her balance. She caught glimpses of faces in the crowd, the cashier's hand covering her mouth, a little boy peeking out from behind his mother's legs, an elderly man standing up from his seat, his coffee forgotten. Someone was recording with their phone. Several people were recording, actually. Their devices pointed at her like accusing fingers. The restaurant's sounds seemed to fade away, replaced by the loud thumping of her own heartbeat in her ears. The smell of fries and burgers mixed with the sharp scent of leather from the approaching officer's gear. The ceiling lights felt too bright, almost blinding. Every sensation was heightened, yet nothing made sense. Time jerked back to normal speed as the officers closed in. Their boots thundered against the floor, drowning out the soft music still playing ironically in the background, some pop song about having a good time. The girl raised her hands instinctively, trying to show she wasn't a threat, trying to indicate there must be some mistake. "Wait," she managed to say, her voice sounding strange and distant to her own ears. "Please, I don't." But the rest of her words were cut off as the officers reached her. She caught one last glimpse of the stunned faces in the crowd, of her fallen phone still displaying her mom's last text, of her wallet lying open on the counter with the carefully folded coupons peeking out. In that moment, just before everything changed, she had a sudden, crystal-clear thought. This is what it feels like when your normal life turns into a nightmare. And somewhere, in the back of her mind, her grandmother's words echoed. Sometimes life tests us in ways we never expect. It's not the test that matters, but how we handle it. Little did anyone in that McDonald's know that this was just the beginning of a story that would soon grip their entire community, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths and ultimately leading to changes none of them could have predicted. But right now, it was just a terrified teenage girl facing the most frightening moment of her young life, with no idea that salvation was just moments away. The cold metal of the counter pressed against the girl's cheek as she struggled to understand what was happening. Her debate team pin dug uncomfortably into her shoulder where it was pinned to her jacket. Just moments ago, she'd been thinking about dinner. Now, her world had shrunk to this terrifying moment. "I didn't do anything," she managed to say, her voice shaking but clear. The words echoed in the unnaturally quiet restaurant. Someone's phone kept chiming with message notifications, creating an odd soundtrack to the scene. The smell of burger grease and cleaning solution filled her nostrils as she was pressed against the counter. The female officer spoke into her radio, her voice crisp and professional. "Suspect apprehended at the McDonald's on Parker Street." Suspect. The word hit the girl like a physical blow. She'd never been a suspect in anything before. The scariest thing she'd ever done was turn in her English essay a day late. "Please," she tried again, "can someone call my mom? She's at work at Central Hospital. I'm supposed to bring dinner home to me." The pressure on her back increased slightly, cutting off her words. She could hear the younger officer's breathing, slightly heavy from the sudden exertion. Around her, the restaurant had become a strange mix of chaos and stillness. Some customers hurried toward the exits, parents rushing their children past the scene. Others stood rooted in place, phones raised, recording everything. The girl caught fragments of their whispered conversations. That can't be right. Should we do something? But she's just a kid. I was just talking to her in debate club yesterday. The evening manager stepped forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. Officers, there must be some mistake. I know this young lady. She's a regular here, never causes any trouble. His familiar voice, usually cheerful when greeting customers, now carried a note of concern and confusion. The girl felt tears welling up in her eyes but fought them back. Her grandmother had always taught her to stay strong, to keep her dignity no matter what. But it was hard to feel dignified with her face pressed against a fast food counter, her hands being cuffed behind her back. She could see her reflection fragmenting in the polished metal of the soda machine, pieces of her scared face, her blue jacket, the officer's uniform. The restaurant's overhead lights created strange patterns in the reflection, like a broken kaleidoscope of this surreal moment. Through the windows, she could see people on the street stopping to stare. The evening bus rolled past, its passengers' faces pressed against the windows, witnessing this scene that felt like it belonged in a movie rather than in her real life. A life where she never had any interaction with police beyond saying hello to the officer who sometimes visited their school. The handcuffs clicked into place, cold and heavy on her wrists. She'd seen this happen on TV shows, but nothing had prepared her for how it actually felt. The metal bit into her skin, and she had to fight the urge to struggle against them. Her debate team training kicked in. Stay calm, think clearly, explain your position. Officers, please check my student ID. It's in my backpack. I'm on the debate team. I was just buying dinner for my younger siblings. Please, this is all a mistake. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, surprising even herself. Years of public speaking practice were finally paying off, though never in a way she'd imagined. The younger male officer began reciting her rights, his voice almost apologetic. The words blurred together in her ears, something about remaining silent about attorneys. Words she'd heard on countless police shows but never thought would be directed at her. Her phone lay on the floor where she dropped it, screen still lit up with her mother's last text. Don't forget the apple slices. Such a normal message from just minutes ago when her life still made sense. Now it felt like a message from another world entirely. The restaurant's music had stopped, leaving an eerie silence, broken only by the continuing sizzle of the fries in the kitchen and the murmur of voices from the growing crowd. Someone in the back was still recording, the red light of their phone's camera glowing like an accusing eye in the dimness. As the officers began to move her toward the door, she caught sight of her reflection in the window. Her neat debate team shirt now wrinkled, her carefully braided hair coming undone, her face a mask of confusion and fear. But in her eyes, there was something else, a determination to stay strong, to prove this was a mistake, to handle this test with the grace her grandmother had always taught her. Little did anyone know that in just a few moments, everything would change again. But for now, a teenage girl who'd done nothing wrong was being led out of a McDonald's in handcuffs, while witnesses recorded what would soon become a viral video about justice, mistakes, and the power of truth to emerge even in the darkest moments. The glass doors of McDonald's had just started to swing open, the cool evening air rushing in, when everything changed. A breathless voice cut through the tense atmosphere like a knife. Wait, stop, that's not her. An elderly woman burst through the other set of doors, her gray hair wind-blown and her floral scarf flying behind her like a banner. She was clutching her chest, trying to catch her breath. The sight was so unexpected that everyone, officers, customers, and even the kitchen staff, froze in place. I just saw her, the real thief, running down Mason Street. The woman gasped out, pointing frantically toward the darkness beyond the parking lot. She's wearing a blue jacket too, but she's got my purse. That's not the same girl. The female officer's grip on the girl's arm loosened slightly. Time seemed to stand still in the brightly lit restaurant. The only movement came from the drinks machine, still humming quietly in the background, and the occasional flash from someone's phone camera. Through the large windows, they could all see a figure sprinting past the streetlights, clutching something dark against their chest. The blue jacket they wore was similar to the girl's, the same color that had been described in the police dispatch. But that was where the similarity ended. The girl felt her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. She watched as realization slowly dawned on the officers' faces. The female officer's professional mask cracked slightly, showing a flicker of uncertainty. The younger officer's hand dropped from his belt, and the third officer stepped back, creating space. "Ma'am," the female officer called to the elderly woman, her voice careful and controlled, "are you absolutely certain? This isn't the person who took your purse." The elderly woman shook her head vigorously, still catching her breath. No, definitely not. I got a good look at the thief when she grabbed my purse at the bus stop. That girl ran straight past me just now, still carrying my bag. This young lady," she gestured to the handcuffed girl, "isn't the one." The restaurant had gone so quiet you could hear the ice slowly melting in abandoned drinks. The evening manager stepped forward again, his keys jingling softly at his belt. "I tried to tell you, officers. This young lady is a regular customer. She's here almost every Tuesday after debate practice." Someone in the crowd spoke up, one of the girl's classmates who had been quietly recording the scene. "She's the top student in our class. She helps tutor kids after school. This is crazy." Others began to nod and murmur in agreement, their voices growing stronger as they found their courage. The girl stood perfectly still, afraid to move or speak, as if any action might somehow reverse this moment of truth. She could feel the handcuffs still biting into her wrists, could still smell the leather from the officer's gear mixed with the restaurant's familiar French fry aroma. But now everything felt different, like waking up from a nightmare to find the sun rising. Through the windows, they could see police cars with flashing lights speeding down Mason Street, presumably in pursuit of the actual thief. The sound of sirens faded into the distance, carrying with them the chaos that had so briefly and dramatically disrupted the normal Tuesday evening. The elderly woman had made her way to a chair, helped by concerned customers. She kept shaking her head and mumbling, "I'm so sorry," while looking at the girl with genuine distress in her eyes. A teenage boy brought her a cup of water, his hands shaking slightly as he set it down. The girl's phone still lay on the floor where she dropped it, now showing multiple missed calls from her mom. The screen flickered with incoming text messages, probably her younger siblings wondering where their dinner was. Such normal concerns seemed almost funny now, after what had just happened. The female officer moved behind the girl, her movements now gentle and apologetic. The handcuffs clicked open, and the girl slowly brought her hands forward, rubbing her sore wrists. The red marks stood out starkly against her skin, physical evidence of the mistake that had just been corrected. As feeling returned to her hands, the girl became aware of every sensation around her, the warm air from the heating vents, the lingering ache in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her legs. But most of all, she felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her, waiting to see how she would react to this moment of vindication. They wouldn't have to wait long to find out, because even as she stood there, still processing everything that had happened, she was already thinking about what needed to happen next, not just for her, but for everyone involved. This story wasn't over yet. In many ways, it was just beginning. The McDonald's dining room had transformed into something entirely different from its usual self. Gone was the casual dinner crowd atmosphere, replaced by a strange mix of tension and relief. The girl stood near the counter, gently rubbing her wrists where the handcuffs had left angry red marks, while around her, a whirlwind of activity unfolded. The female officer who had led the arrest was now speaking in a completely different tone, softer, almost maternal. "I am so sorry," she said, her official demeanor cracking to reveal genuine remorse. "We received a report of a theft and the description." She trailed off, looking at the blue jacket that had caused such a devastating mistake. The evening manager appeared with an ice pack wrapped in a clean towel. "Here," he said kindly, "this should help with the swelling." His hands shook slightly as he handed it over, his face showing the concern of someone who had watched one of his regular customers go through something unthinkable. From the kitchen, the smell of burning French fries suddenly filled the air. Everyone had been so focused on the drama that the regular rhythms of the restaurant had fallen apart. A young worker rushed to deal with it, the sound of the fry basket being lifted providing an oddly normal moment in this surreal situation. The elderly woman whose purse had been stolen was still there, now sitting at a nearby table with tears in her eyes. "My dear," she called out, "please come sit with me for a moment." Her hands trembled as she patted the seat next to her. The girl hesitated for a moment, then walked over, still holding the ice pack to her wrist. "I feel terrible about this," the woman said, reaching out to pat the girl's hand. "If I had gotten here just a few minutes earlier." Her voice cracked with emotion. The girl found herself in the strange position of comforting the very person whose report had led to her detention. "It's not your fault," she heard herself saying. "You were the victim of a crime too." Meanwhile, the younger officer was collecting contact information from witnesses. Many of the customers who had recorded the incident were now eagerly offering their videos as evidence, not of guilt, as originally intended, but of innocence and injustice. Phones were passed around, statements were taken, and business cards exchanged. The girl's own phone had finally been retrieved from the floor, its screen now cracked from the fall. 15 missed calls from her mom lit up the display, along with dozens of text messages. Her hands shook as she dialed, dreading having to explain what had happened. How do you tell your mother that her daughter, the straight-A student and debate team captain, had been handcuffed in a McDonald's? The third officer returned from searching the area, shaking his head. "Lost her," he reported quietly to his colleagues. "She disappeared somewhere past the old factory." The news about the actual thief's escape created a new wave of murmurs through the crowd that remained in the restaurant. A small group of the girl's classmates had stayed behind, clustering nearby in a protective circle. One of them had called their debate team coach, who was now rushing through the door, still wearing his teaching clothes. His normally composed face showed shock as he took in the scene. "I want to file a complaint," the girl said suddenly, her voice stronger than she expected. The restaurant fell quiet again. "Not to cause trouble," she continued, looking directly at the officers, "but because this shouldn't happen to anyone else. Ever." The female officer nodded slowly, reaching for her notepad with a hint of respect in her eyes. The evening manager had been busy too, boxing up a fresh order of food, not just the original Happy Meals she'd tried to order, but extra items as well. "On the house," he said firmly when the girl tried to protest. "For you and your whole family, and you eat free here for the rest of the year." It was a small gesture, but his voice made it clear that he needed to do something, anything, to help make this right. Outside, the evening had grown properly dark. Through the windows, they could see more police cars arriving, higher-ranking officers coming to deal with the situation. The local news van wasn't far behind, its satellite dish visible over the parking lot trees. The girl's mom burst through the door just then, still in her hospital scrubs, face tight with worry. The moment she saw her daughter, she ran forward, pulling her into a fierce hug. "My baby," she whispered over and over, her voice thick with emotion. The girl felt her own composure finally crack, tears sliding down her face as she buried her head in her mother's shoulder. Around them, the restaurant continued its strange transformation. What had started as a regular fast food dinner stop had become the scene of something that would spark conversations throughout the community. Customers who had come for quick meals had become witnesses. A routine arrest had become a wake-up call. And a teenage girl who had just wanted to buy dinner for her siblings had become the center of a story that was about to spread far beyond the walls of this McDonald's. As her mother held her close, the girl caught a glimpse of their reflection in the darkened window. She saw strength there, not victimhood. Tomorrow would bring questions, discussions, and decisions. But for now, she just held on tight, breathing in her mother's familiar hospital soap smell, feeling the warmth of her family's love contrast sharply with the cold memory of those handcuffs. By sunrise the next morning, the videos had already gone viral. People across the city woke up to their social media feeds filled with clips of what had happened at the McDonald's. The footage, shot from different angles by various customers, told the story in stark detail: the sudden police entrance, the mistaken arrest, and the dramatic moment when the elderly woman revealed the truth. The girls' debate team coach was the first to take action. He'd spent the night making calls, and by morning, he had arranged a press conference on the steps of the high school. Local news crews arrived to find hundreds of students gathered there, many wearing blue jackets in solidarity with their classmate. They held handmade signs with messages like, "Could have been any of us," and "Listen first, act second." Inside the school building, the principal called an emergency assembly. The cafeteria fell silent as the girl walked to the podium, still showing the marks on her wrists from the handcuffs. Her voice shook at first but grew stronger as she spoke about what had happened. "I was scared," she admitted to her fellow students. "But what scared me most wasn't the handcuffs or the accusations. It was knowing that if the real thief hadn't run past right then, if that kind elderly lady hadn't spoken up, how much worse could this have gotten? The silence in the room was heavy with understanding. The local news stations ran the story every hour. They showed clips of the incident alongside interviews with witnesses from the restaurant. The evening manager's voice cracked as he described watching one of his favorite customers being handcuffed. "She's been coming here for years," he said. "Always polite, always helping others. How did nobody check this before putting hands on her?" Social media exploded with support. The hashtag Listen First started trending locally, then nationally. People shared their own stories of similar mistakes, of judgment too quick and consequences too severe. The girl's story had touched a nerve, making people think about how easily lives could be disrupted by hasty assumptions. The police department called a press conference of their own. The chief stood before the cameras, looking uncomfortable in his formal uniform. "We made a mistake," he said plainly. "Our officers acted on a description without proper verification. We're reviewing our procedures to ensure this doesn't happen again." Behind him, the 3 officers from the incident stood silently, their badges covered with black bands of remorse. Letters and emails poured in from across the country. Many were from other young people who'd faced similar situations. Some were from retired police officers offering to help reform training procedures. The elderly woman whose purse had been stolen wrote a long letter to the local newspaper, calling for changes in how suspect descriptions were handled. The girl's mother took a day off from her hospital shifts to accompany her daughter to City Hall. They sat through a lengthy council meeting where community leaders discussed the incident. One by one, people stood up to speak: teachers, parents, store owners, all calling for change. The council members listened, really listened, taking notes and asking questions. Local businesses started putting up signs: "We check facts first." The McDonald's where it happened went further, instituting a new policy requiring manager verification before police could detain anyone on the premises. The evening manager proudly displayed the new policy next to the register, right where everyone could see it. The debate team dedicated their next competition to discussing police procedure reforms. The girl led her team to victory, arguing passionately for better training and verification protocols. In the audience, several police officers sat taking notes, including the female officer from that night at McDonald's. A local civil rights attorney offered to help the family pro bono, not to sue, but to work with the police department on improving their procedures. Together, they drafted guidelines for how officers should handle suspect descriptions and verify identities before taking action. The guidelines would later become known as the McDonald's Protocol. The girls' younger siblings started learning important lessons too. Their sister's experience opened up family discussions about rights, responsibility, and standing up for what's right. The girl helped them understand that while what happened was wrong, how people responded to it could make things better for everyone. Even the school curriculum changed. The Social Studies Department added a unit on civil rights and community policing. Students learned about the importance of speaking up, about knowing their rights, and about how communities can work together to prevent misunderstandings from becoming tragedies. As weeks passed, the viral videos were replaced by clips of community meetings, training sessions, and positive changes. The story shifted from one of mistaken identity to one of community transformation. People began to see how a frightening incident at a fast food restaurant had become a catalyst for meaningful reform. Through it all, the girl remained focused on her goals, keeping up her grades, leading the debate team, helping her siblings. But now she had a new purpose too. Her experience had shown her the power of speaking up, of turning personal trauma into positive change. She hadn't asked to become a symbol of needed reform, but she was determined to make the most of the opportunity to help others. 6 months after that unforgettable night at McDonald's, the girl stood at a podium in the police academy's main lecture hall. Her blue jacket, the same one she'd worn that night, was now a symbol of change rather than a source of mistaken identity. The room was filled with police cadets, their faces attentive as she shared her story. "I could have chosen to be angry," she told them, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I could have let that night define me as a victim. Instead, I decided to help make sure it never happens to anyone else." The cadets nodded, many taking notes. Her story had become a mandatory part of their training, a real-world example of why proper procedures matter. Behind her sat the 3 officers from that night, now instructors in the department's new verification protocols. The female officer had become one of her strongest supporters, working tirelessly to change how suspect descriptions were handled. Together, they had developed a checklist that officers now had to complete before making any arrest based on clothing descriptions. The McDonald's where it all happened had changed too. The evening manager had installed a community board near the entrance, filled with positive stories about local youth. The girl's picture was there, not from the night of the incident, but from when she won the state debate championships. Under it was a simple message: look deeper, listen longer, learn always. Her debate team had taken her experience and turned it into a winning platform. They traveled to competitions across the state, arguing for police reform and community engagement. Their presentations always included body camera footage from that night, donated by the officers involved, showing how quickly assumptions could escalate into mistakes. The elderly woman whose stolen purse had started it all had become an unexpected ally. She spoke at community meetings about the importance of accurate descriptions and patient police work. "I lost my purse that night," she would say, "but we almost lost something much more valuable: trust between police and our young people." The girl's younger siblings had watched their sister turn a traumatic experience into a force for good. Her little brother now wanted to become a lawyer, while her sister talked about being a police officer, but one who always double-checks everything, she would add firmly. Their mother beamed with pride at how her children had found strength in adversity. Local businesses had embraced the changes too. The Check First policy had spread beyond McDonald's to other stores in the area. Security guards received special training in verification procedures, and managers were taught how to de-escalate situations until all facts were clear. The number of mistaken identity incidents had dropped to 0 in the past 6 months. The police department had transformed its training program. New officers now spent time in community centers getting to know the people they would serve. They learned about implicit bias, proper verification procedures, and the importance of building trust. The girl's case study was required reading, complete with security camera footage showing how easily assumptions could lead to mistakes. Technology played a role in the changes too. The department developed a new app that required officers to complete a digital verification form before making any arrest based on clothing descriptions. The app was named Second Look, inspired by the girl's story and her call for officers to take that crucial extra moment to verify their assumptions. The city council had taken notice of the positive changes. They awarded the girl a special commendation for her work in community reform. But more importantly, they allocated funding for ongoing training and community engagement programs. The McDonald's protocol was now official city policy, with other cities requesting copies to implement in their own departments. Her academic life had flourished despite, or perhaps because of, the incident. College acceptance letters had started arriving, many with full scholarships. Universities were impressed not just by her grades and debate victories, but by her mature handling of a difficult situation and her commitment to positive change. The viral videos of that night were still online, but now they were used as teaching tools. Police academies across the country requested copies for their training programs. The girl's story had become a case study in how to turn a potential tragedy into an opportunity for growth and reform. Looking out at the cadets' faces, the girl saw hope for the future. These new officers would start their careers knowing her story, understanding the importance of careful verification, and recognizing that every person they encountered was someone's child, someone's sibling, someone's friend. That night could have ended differently, she concluded her speech. But because people were willing to speak up, to admit mistakes, and to work for change, it became the beginning of something positive. Remember my story when you're out there. Take that extra moment, make that extra check. Because somewhere out there, someone else's child is wearing a blue jacket, just trying to buy dinner for their family. The applause that followed wasn't just for her speech. It was for every person who had helped turn a mistake into a movement, fear into reform, and a moment of injustice into a lasting change for the better. As the girl gathered her notes, she caught sight of her reflection in the lectern's polished surface. She saw more than just a high school student now. She saw someone who had learned to use her voice for change, someone who had helped build bridges between police and community, someone who had shown that even the darkest moments could lead to dawn.